Hi crew, the help here, Miles Stairs Wick Shop, wickshop.com. Today we're going to take a look at some lamps, but specifically we're going to look at the parts of the lamp and what they're called. I know there's a lot of confusion and misinformation going on. A lot of things are getting called things that they aren't. And it's good to have proper terminology when discussing lamps and heaters, and when ordering parts it's good to know, what you're talking about and be able to articulate what it is you need to order and where it fits and what to measure. So we figured we'd go ahead and take some time to go through that real quick. We'll start here with a pretty standard American number 2 lamp. And starting from the top, you've got your flame spreader. This is the piece on a side draft or a center draft lamp that spreads air in between the inside and the outside of the flame to give you that nice bright flame. And this one's a thimble type flame spreader, and you can tell that because it kind of looks like a thimble. It's got its little top hat on it. This one's a B&H. You can see the markings and the patent date on there. Moving down, we have the flame gallery itself, and we've got our chimney fingers. And since this one is a center draft lamp, we do have a center draft tube. And you do have a central draft tube on a side draft, but it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom of the lamp. So you've got your inner draft tube, your inner wick tube. That's interchangeable. They're the same thing, the inner draft tube. Your draft tube is your inner wick tube. And then around the outside of the wick, out here, we have the outer draft tube, or the outer wick tube. I should say, sorry, that's not a draft tube. It's the outer wick tube. And then, of course, your wick is sandwiched in between the two all the way around. And it's important when taking measurements, when you're asked, well, what are the measurements for your inner and outer wick tube? You want to measure across those and make sure that you get a very accurate measurement with like a machinist caliper or something like that, because it's important. There's not a lot of difference between a number 2 B&H and Rayo wick and a number 2 P&A wick, but there is definitely enough difference between the two that one will not fit or work appropriately in the other. Another thing we're going to take a look at here is the wick knob, the wick riser knob. You see they turn that, and your wick goes up and down. There's your wick. Everybody knows what a wick is, that nice cotton piece inside that makes the magic happen. Sometimes we'll ask to see what the markings are on the wick knob, and this is important when taking pictures to send them in and ask questions. You can see this one says patent applied for. It could say P&A. It could say something else. So that's an important clue when looking. On top of the font, which is the main portion of the lamp, you have your fill hole and your fill cap. And this is another place we might look for markings. Again, this one says B&H, so we've got pretty good clues here that this is either a B&H or a Perfection or a Rayo that somebody's put some B&H parts on, because some of those are interchangeable. I'm going to leave that off for the moment. And you've got your font, your tank, and then on the bottom of the font, sorry, I'm working in small amount of space here. The bottom of the font is the foot of the lamp. And that's not too important. Embossing on the foot or piercing on the foot. This one's got some fleur-de-lis piercing on it. Can be telltale of what it is. The piercing on the side of the lamp, on the side of the flame gallery, can be telltale. If the flame spreader is not marked, the piercing on the flame spreader can be kind of telltale as to what the lamp is. And all those, all these are clues. It takes all of them together to sort of really identify what you've got going on, because there are, for some of these American number 2s, like the Bradley and Hubbard number 2, the Rayo number 2, and the Perfection number 2, there are quite a few interchangeable parts, and it's good to really know which one is which. So we'll go ahead and remove the flame gallery here. Sorry, it's a little squeaky. This one has an actual wick sleeve. Get that out of the way. Go ahead and pull our font out of the way so we can take a look here. So the riser on this particular lamp is a sleeve. It goes all the way around, and the wick goes on the inside. And then, let me put this down real quick. I'm working one-handed here. If we take a look inside of the wick sleeve, after we get the wick out, if we can get it to focus in there, we can see there are some little barbs on the inside of this wick sleeve that hold the wick in place. And that's actually what helps the wick to traverse up and down. And there's a lot of different styles of wick riser mechanism. This one is a full sleeve with a rack. This is your rack on the side here. There will be a little gear on the inside of the wick knob and pin there that move that up and down. So that's your rack. That spot that goes around the wick is the wick sleeve. And that's pretty much all the portions of a lamp. These are things that all lamps have in common. All lamps have a wick riser of some sort. All center draft and side draft lamps have a flame spreader. Well, I shouldn't say all. Most center draft and most side draft lamps have a flame spreader. Not all side draft lamps have a flame spreader. The Cosmos style lamps generally do not have a flame spreader of any type. Matadors do. This back to the font here. This is your draft tube or your inner wick tube. It could be called both because it is the draft tube. It draws the draft in from the bottom of the lamp, and it holds the inside of the wick together with the outer wick tube to form a nice ring and get airflow on the inside and the outside. And this is one of the things you look for when you're picking lamps. You can see here, this one's got a little crinkle down here. That's sort of where the flame spreader fits into and stops. If we put this in here, we notice that there's another crinkle in there that holds that flame spreader in place at the right depth. And if fuel seeps up on the inside of the wick, it dribbles down the inside of that wick tube, and the inner draft tube and the inner wick tube are actually separated there. They're two pieces with a little trough on the inside, and it dribbles back here and back down into the wick, back down into the tank. So you don't have to worry about that. But one of the things you're looking for when you're picking is to make sure that this central draft tube on a center draft lamp has not been cut. So if we take our flame gallery and we put it back on there, we screw it back down to where it's flush again, you'll see that inner and outer wick tube are pretty well in line with each other. The inner wick tube's a little lower than the outer wick tube, but that's fine. But the inner wick tube is nice and round. It obviously hasn't been cut off. Sometimes you'll find these where they've cut the inner wick tube down to electrify them, and generally you can find a hole in a lamp as well when you're picking. And then if you find a lamp like that, the only reason to buy it would be for parts. They may have some parts you want, but that lamp's been butchered, and in most cases it's not worth it to put it back together if it can't even be repaired. So this is a Miller New Juno, and this one's pretty beat up, but I brought it out to show some differences. You notice before we had a screw-in type flame gallery. This Miller New Juno has a bayonet mount, a bayonet style flame gallery, and it's a little different, so I figured we'd show you that. It also has a different wick mechanism. If we take this flame gallery and we just give it a turn, and then it'll pull straight out, and that's a bayonet mount. You can see there's a little dimple in there, and then there's a little pin that matches on the inside. And then if we go ahead and take the inside of the flame gallery and take a look, you can see here in the back, there's our little pin, and there's our bayonet mount for the back. So we can give that a little turn, and it's a little stiff, but we can give that a little turn and then just lift it right out, theoretically. It's going to fight me though because we're on camera. And there you've got your inner wick tube. This is your outer wick tube, and your draft tube is on the lamp with your inner wick tube there. And your chimney fingers are on the outside of the flame gallery, and this one does have a nice little lift, so you can lift and turn and lock it in place to light your lamp drop it back down. We talked about that in the basics video about why that is, and I'll go ahead and drop a link to that in the description. But this one has a different wick mechanism. I'll pull it in here a little closer and see if we can't get a better look at it. But if you look here, this one's actually got an inside wick sleeve with these little guys on it here. And if I turn the lamp a little bit, you can watch, and as it goes down, those come out and hold that wick from the inside, as opposed to the outside like the other set that we had. This one's actually in the lamp, and it's part of the lamp font itself and not on the flame gallery like the last number 2 was. And these are pretty good. You know, you raise them all the way up, you slide your wick on, making sure that one of your splits is here where your wick rack rod is, and then you just go ahead and send it down, and it will pick that wick up and take it down. And that's kind of a fun mechanism. B&H number 2s have a kind of difficult mechanism. I'll see if I can get that on film, but that's totally different. But this is kind of the other one was an outer wick sleeve, and this one here is an inner wick sleeve with these little claws in here that come out and catch it. One of the nice things about these guys is if you can bring those out as you lift that gallery up, you'll find 1 or 2 that catch, and you can just gently bring those out, and that is how you get your rack and everything out of the lamp. I don't know if I'll be able to do it here on camera, but we may save that for when we do a video on the new Juno. But once that's out, you can actually pull that whole match out of there, and you can take your wick riser, your wick sleeve completely out. You can take your rack completely out, and you can clean everything up, and it gets real nice and neat then. So here we've got a somewhat beat up Millard New Juno number 2, but this will kind of illustrate our point here. This one is very obviously, from first look, a bayonet mount lamp. You can see right above the fill hole there, you can actually see the pin where the bayonet mount goes. And if we give this a little turn, it'll pull right out. Typical bayonet mount. And actually this one, the flame gallery itself is bayonet mount into the lamp, and then the outside of the flame gallery and the lift and the chimney fingers are actually part of another set that will bayonet mount out of the burner assembly itself, which is kind of nice. Easier to clean that way. But you can see there's no threads around the collar here at all, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a threaded collar, but the existence of this pin here, if there was a pin or a single dimple here, we've got a pretty good shot that is a bayonet mount lamp, and this one here is. So that sort of credits our hypothesis. On a non-bayonet mount, it can be kind of tricky. You may not necessarily see threads on the outside of the collar. We'll take a look at another lamp here. This one is threaded. It does not have any thread lines outside the collar, but also you don't see any dimples there or pins there to indicate that this is a bayonet mount lamp. And if we give it a little unscrew there, you can see the threads. But then again, you know, like I said, just because you don't see threads on the outside doesn't mean it's not threaded. Now here's a Miller number 2, and you can see here the threads are formed into the collar, and you can actually see them on the outside. Sorry, she's a little dirty. But yeah, if you see threads on the outside and you don't see any obvious evidence of a bayonet mount lug or a pin, you've probably got a threaded lamp. But be careful. I mean, definitely do your boil trick and make sure that you get the lamp nice and warm if it's pretty corroded before you start trying to undo either a bayonet mount by getting it to turn in either direction, or trying to unscrew a thread mount. And the mounts, the bayonet mounts, are usually pretty straightforward. They generally are lefty loosey, righty tighty, and you turn them left until they stop, and then they should gently pull out. And this one's just showing you there the lift gallery. So here's a really nice lamp. This is one of my favorites. This is an L&B brevet, maybe brevet. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I don't live in Europe, so you'll have to excuse my American English. But you notice that this lamp looks considerably different than the American style number twos, and one of the big giveaways here is the burner itself. The font maybe not so much, but the burner itself. We've got a very different style post flame spreader there, and you can see this one's post is inside the lamp. Some of them have a little socket in the lamp that accepts the post. Some of them have a post in the lamp that accepts the post. This one has the post in the lamp. And this forcing cone, which we did not see on the American number two burners. And that forcing cone would push air that came in through the outside of the flame gallery and the burner into that flame spreader just underneath that little top cap and cause some turbulence in there, which gives us a nice, bright, clean light. These put out almost as much as the American lamps, but it's a much brighter, cleaner light because of how they're designed. Then this one's pretty good. It is a little finicky. You do have to chase it a little bit, but it's a nice, bright light. And now these, interestingly enough, these were made primarily for railroad stations, little railroad stations. Another trick here is that you look at the chimney fingers on a lot of the European lamps. They're connected. You don't have singular fingers. And this one here is an outside wick sleeve with a rack. But a lot of the European lamps don't have the singular fingers like the American lamps do. This one does have the connected fingers and a full rack and pinion, or rack and carrier. But these were made for mostly for the railroad trade. They would be in the offices, the little railroad offices where you would get your tickets, and they were designed so that they could be filled at the beginning of the night and they could run the entire shift. And you wouldn't have to worry about it giving up, but it would definitely have enough light to illuminate a small railroad office fairly efficiently, and they do a very good job of it. They're definitely not as bright as some of the other lamps, but yeah, remember those fingers there. The fingers and the forcing cone kind of tell you that this is a European style lamp, and it was made by L&B in Europe for the American market. It's not an American made lamp in the European style. You did see L&B brevet on the fill cap, which is kind of a dead giveaway of what this is. And these are not particularly rare lamps. They're around. You can find them on eBay. If you have a good eBay seller that's given you a picture of the fill cap or a picture of the wick knob, you can tell pretty quickly just exactly what you've got there as far as lamps go. And of course, the burner's pretty unique, so you take a look at that burner and you'll kind of know what you've got. These are pretty nice. They're pretty well built. They're very sturdy. You see the wick is inside that forcing cone there. These are really designed to be used, and you can tell you hold the flame spreaders, and they're pretty thick. Again, this is a little post type with a top hat and a forcing cone. And on some of the other European lamps, this forcing cone here that forces that air in underneath that is actually built into the chimney. And here in just a second, we'll show you. This is a Globe Vulcan. This is an 18 line. I have two of these. This would be a fairly standard burner. And you see again, the chimney fingers are all one piece. They're all connected. Post type flame spreader, but you note the absence up there of a forcing cone, which we'll get into a little later here in the video. This is one of my very favorite burners. If there was a perfect burner in my mind, this would be it. And these guys, the Germans, they have some good innovations. Like the fill hole here is in its own little funnel, so it's a little harder to spill. It's got a nice little hole in the cap. Post type flame spreader, but this one has the post on the flame spreader, so it's actually got a socket in the lamp right in there that accepts the post on the flame spreader. And there you can see a better picture of the top of the burner there. These are kind of great. I'm going to be honest, in my mind, if there's a perfect lamp, it's probably an 18 line globe Vulcan. So there's your chimney, at least the bottom end of it, and we'll take some closer looks at those later. But if we replace our flame spreader there and we stick our chimney in, we see that the bottom end of that chimney actually replaces that forcing cone that some of the other European lamps have. And this one's a little off. I think it got dropped at one point, but if we raise up here, you can see the fitter on the chimney forms a nice pinch just below that real nice onion-shaped bulge. And this causes all of that air to be forced up under that little button-type flame spreader there, and into that nice onion-shaped bulge. And you don't have anything obstructing the light. In the L&B, although I love it, that forcing cone does obstruct maybe 10 to 15% of the light output of the lamp total. With this design, you don't have that obstruction. You get a nice light output. It utilizes all of the light output, and you don't have to worry about that space there being taken up by a metallic forcing cone that would have blocked some of this light from in there. And it will push that in and give a nice little almost tulip shaped burn in there. If you get everything just right, you can get what Miles calls a full curl, and it will be a curl up in that little onion there. Most of the time, honestly, you're going to have a few flame spikes. You won't be able to get it perfect, but it'll be darn close. And these put out a really great white light. They do utilize quite a bit of fuel, but they put out quite a bit more light per ounce of fuel. And this is an interesting one. Here in a second, I'll show you my other one. This is the same model. This is an 18-line globe Vulcan. This is my very favorite lamp. If I've got one, this is it. But this one has, you see, some unique features. We have on the bottom left there, we've got our Wick riser knob, and then we've got a couple of other things coming off of it. And although these two burners are very similar, they're not exactly the same. There are some differences. If we go ahead and start poking around here, we'll see that one of the differences is the flame spreader. And the socket for the flame spreader actually comes out of the inner wick tube, and it is held in place in there. There is a very specific reason for this we'll get into here in a second. But we do have a lift gallery here, which is pretty nice. You could put a chimney in this, you can put the shade on it, and you can utilize the lift gallery. You don't have to take those off. You just reach over here, grab your key, and up it goes. And this lifts both the shade and the chimney. And this one's a little sticky. I need to clean her up again, but we burn her quite a bit. But it does just lift it right up and right back down, and makes it very convenient, especially in the olden days when they were flame cut. The other thing this has is a snuffer, and what this little snuffer is going to do is go right up there and put it out. So you'd bring your wick down, and you would let the lamp sort of come to almost a halt, and you just have a little bit of flame there, and then you could put that snuffer up, and you see that snuffer pushes the flame spreader up and actually seals off with the flame spreader with that little sleeve that goes inside the inner wick tube, and this would cool the fuel that wasn't spent while snuffing the flame at the same time, so you wouldn't get so much of that kerosene smell. And as you can see, it will pick up the gallery a little bit, pick up the chimney a little bit, but it's pretty efficient at snuffing all of that out so that you don't have that unburnt kerosene smell. You can see it down in there, kind of hidden away under the flame gallery when not in use. But those are some pretty cool features. You don't see both features in one lamp very often. Generally, you see one feature or the other, but not generally both. And this one, honestly, I need to go ahead and rebend the little fingers that push the flame spreader up. They do pull that chimney much more than they really should. It shouldn't pull that chimney very much at all, but I just haven't had a chance to go ahead and fix that. Anyways, let's take a look at some chimneys. This is a pretty standard American style chimney. This is a Rochester Zero. It's easy to get in frame, but you can see the somewhat shallop-shaped bulge there. Not like the round, pronounced European bulge, but it's much longer and much shallower. You've got a fitter here, but there's no shelf. There's no pinch. And when you're measuring for a new chimney, you need to make sure that you measure that fitter. It needs to be very precise. But this shape is indicative of all of the American sizes. So if you see this shape, you can be pretty sure that this is an American chimney, not necessarily an American lamp. Could be that this fitter fit some other lamp randomly. But let's take a look at this next to a Macbeth number 4. And these are roughly the same size, but this is why, and we do have people emailing us, hey, can you make me a chimney that will fit my lamp? No. We make chimneys. There are variations in the glass. See, there's just a bit of variation in the width of the bottom of those two chimneys. And this is why chimney fingers were made out of brass and were springy, so that you could go ahead and reshape those to fit the chimney that you were able to get. And there's that nice Acme signature on the top, number 0 Rochester. Again, it says Rochester. It's from Rochester, New York. This is obviously an American lamp chimney. If it's on a European lamp, somebody put it on there years later. It's not an original. This kind of tells you right here that it tells you what it is, which is always kind of fun. And we go into greater depth in that on another video. Remember, you've got a fitter down here. There's no shelf. You've got a long, sort of shallot shaped as opposed to a round onion shaped bulge. That is your very typical American shaped lamp chimney. So let's take a look real quick at another one that you may see on American lamps. This is a Cosmos style chimney. Really easy to tell it's a Cosmos style chimney because they're generally very plain. We will take a look at one of our sans rival Cosmos chimneys, but this is a standard Cosmos, and you can see that it's got one size for the fitter and one size for the chimney body itself, but there's no bulge. The fitter is really what you're kind of concerned with. The chimney doesn't have a lot of dimension to it beyond that. On this one, there is a pinch in the middle, in between the two. This is not always the case. Some of them are just a shelf. This one has a nice little pinch in there to try and get some flame velocity and draw that flame a little further. This is the chain fireproof brand that we talked about in that other video, but this is an original chimney, and they did have a little pinch on there in some of the originals, not all of them, but that would give a little space in there to sort of pull that, cause that flame turbulence and velocity to pull that flame up into the lamp and get a little more light out of it. It sort of works. These Cosmos didn't put out a lot of light to begin with. We do have the sans rival chimney that we put out. This is a 6-line sans rival, and you can see here this one's got a little wasp waist in it, but the chimney is basically the same. You've got a fitter, you've got a chimney, and then in here, let's see if I can get into it, you've got a pinch, and then a bulge, and a wasp waist, and then another bulge, and another pinch. And then the chimney actually expands out from there. And what the idea was to cause flame velocity from that pinch to the top of that, from this pinch here, through that wasp waist section to the top of that wasp waist, and it would draw that flame up so that you could get a much longer flame face and therefore get a much more light out of these little lamps. I shouldn't say much more. You get a quite a bit more light, but not a huge amount. It is definitely appreciable, and that really kind of pushes these into the realm of usability, where they may have just been a slightly larger oil candle before. They'll put out some light, and in our lamplight episode on the 2/6 line Cosmos, these were the chimneys that we had in them, and it does draw that up, and you can see that those two lamps did illuminate that table pretty well. So let's move on to definite European styles. This is a 20-line Matador chimney we had in the other video with the burn marks on it. And you can see that it's got a fitter and an onion shape, and then a nice little shelf here in between the fitter and the onion shape, which then tapers fairly rapidly into the rest of the chimney body. And these are pretty good. They were pretty standard Matador style chimney that you would have seen on a Matador style lamp, side draft lamps. They're not great. We do have one of ours that looks more like the Globe Vulcan that we'll grab here and take a look at, that draws that flame up a little better. These are the Globe Vulcan chimneys, Neo Vulcan chimneys, and they've got fairly pronounced fitter with a very pronounced pinch. And the Neo Vulcan Matador chimney is very similar to this one with a slightly less pronounced pinch, but about the same bulb shape up here on the top. And then it tapers in a little more shallowly to the body of the chimney. And then the body of the chimney is the same essential diameter all the way up to the top. And these work very well. Even on lamps that have a metallic flame director, or something like that, they do still push a lot of that external air back up under that flame spreader, causing just the right type of turbulence in there to get a good white light out of. And with a perfectly trimmed wick in something like an 18-line or 16-line Globe Vulcan, you can get a full curl. I know with my LMB Brevet, if I get everything just right, it will give a full curl burn. It doesn't like to do that. It will tend to drift a little bit and have to be chased. But the Vulcans, they will obtain that flame and keep it through the duration. So anyways, there's some explanation on lamp parts. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.